Are you taught away even about your
I'm so I love you for